Hollywood in the 1940s was supposed to play it safe, right? Not a chance. Some films from that era packed more scandal, shock, and cultural chaos than today's so-called edgy blockbusters. Imagine movies so provocative they rattled censors, sparked protests, or forced audiences to question everything they thought was normal. What made these films so dangerous? Was it their themes, their stars, or the sheer nerve of their creators? Let's peel back the velvet curtain and see which classics were a little too hot for their own good. The Great Dictator, 1940. What happens when the world's most famous silent comedian decides to declare war on Hitler before most of Hollywood dared even whisper his name? You get The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin's boldest, ballsiest gamble. Picture this. It's 1940. America hasn't even entered World War II. Nazi Germany is steamrolling Europe, and Chaplin, the little tramp adored by millions, suddenly shows up on screen in a Hitler mustache, giving a speech that roasts fascism so hard it nearly burns a hole in the reel. People forget how shocking this was. Political satire on this scale was unheard of. Chaplin wasn't just poking fun at dictators, he was calling them out live and uncensored, at a time when major studios were still terrified to offend Germany. This was pre-Pearl Harbor, when isolationism was running hot, and some studios were quietly cutting anti-Nazi content just to keep foreign ticket sales flowing. But Chaplin? He called the dictator Adenoid Hinkle, played a dual role as both the tyrant and a humble Jewish barber, and absolutely eviscerated fascist ideology through slapstick, wordplay, and jaw-dropping speeches that would later echo in real-world politics. The controversy exploded from every direction. Some critics thought Chaplin had crossed a sacred line, daring to make a comedy out of genocide and war. Others claimed he was using the big screen for propaganda. In Germany, the film was instantly banned. Some U.S. theaters wouldn't even touch it, worried about retaliation from pro-Nazi groups or isolationist politicians. And get this, the British government, desperate not to anger Hitler in 1940, initially kept it off their screens too. But Chaplin didn't blink. His final speech, a stunning call for human decency, democracy, and courage, still gives viewers goosebumps. The Great Dictator wasn't just controversial, it was a cultural earthquake. The film paved the way for every anti-authoritarian satire that followed. Mel Brooks, Stanley Kubrick, and even Sacha Baron Cohen owe Chaplin a debt. Who knew a slapstick icon could throw the first real cinematic punch at the world's most feared dictator? In one film, Chaplin went from clown to crusader and changed Hollywood forever. Casablanca, 1942. If you think Casablanca is just a love story, you're missing the heat. Underneath its smoke-filled nightclubs and unforgettable lines, this film was a powder keg in a tuxedo, controversial, subversive, and downright dangerous in its day. Let's set the scene. The world is at war. Refugees are flooding across Europe. America is officially neutral, but the question on everyone's lips is, how long can we stay on the sidelines? Enter Casablanca, set in a Moroccan melting pot where spies, traitors, resistance fighters, and Nazi officers rub elbows every night at Rick's Café Américain. Humphrey Bogart plays Rick Blaine, the cynical American who's sticking his neck out for nobody until love and war collide, and neutrality flies right out the window. Here's what made it so controversial. First, it dared to openly champion the anti-Nazi cause at a time when isolationists still had real power in the U.S. Congress and public opinion. The villains weren't just generic bad guys. They were swastika-wearing Nazis. The heroes weren't squeaky clean. They were resistance fighters, desperate refugees, and a morally compromised American. Every romantic decision is tangled up in questions of duty, sacrifice, and political allegiance. Even the production was a hotbed of tension. Warner Brothers shot the movie while the war was raging, with real-life refugees playing background characters. The script was rewritten daily as the war shifted. Sometimes actors didn't know how the film would end until the final reel. And that iconic ending, the one where Rick gives up the woman he loves for the greater good? In 1942, that was a grenade in the heart of Hollywood's happy ending formula. Censors wrung their hands over the film's implied affairs, drinking, and moral ambiguity. Political groups squabbled over the depiction of the Vichy government, but audiences saw themselves in Rick and Ilsa. torn between personal happiness and the call of something greater. The line "We'll always have Paris" isn't just about lost love. It's about the price of doing the right thing when the world's on fire. Decades later, Casablanca is iconic. But in 1942, it was a bold act of cinematic rebellion, showing that Hollywood, even when dressed up in romance and glamour, could take a side, take a risk, and change how we see heroism. It wasn't just a movie. It was a message. In a world gone mad, sometimes you have to pick a side and hope the world remembers which one you chose. The Outlaw, 1943. You know a movie's controversial when it spends more time in courtrooms than in cinemas. That's the legacy of The Outlaw, Howard Hughes' Wild West epic that made headlines before it ever made the box office. Forget gunslingers and cattle rustlers, the real drama was backstage, as censors and movie moguls fought a battle over one thing: Jane Russell. Hughes, the eccentric billionaire-turned Hollywood producer, set out to create a Western so hot it would sear itself into popular culture. The trick? Cast Jane Russell as a sultry, gun-toting heroine and design a wardrobe that left censors gasping. Seriously, he literally invented a special bra to amplify Russell's curves, turning her into a sex symbol overnight. But the Hays office, America's moral watchdogs, weren't having it. They slapped the film with bans and delays, demanding that scene after scene be cut or reshot. Hughes, he played a different game. Instead of caving, he leaked risque publicity photos, staged a fake morality crusade, and let rumors do the marketing for him. The result: The Outlaw was yanked from theaters, re-released, banned, and re-released again, each time attracting more controversy and bigger crowds. Is it really that shocking? People wondered. Of course, they had to see for themselves. Jane Russell became a national obsession, her name forever linked to boundary-pushing Hollywood scandal. And while the film's plot is classic Western, feuding over a horse, a woman, and a grudge, it's the film's unapologetic sexual energy that made it infamous. But the controversy wasn't just about cleavage. The film tested the limits of what could be shown and suggested on American screens. It exposed the absurdity of censorship in an era desperate to appear decent. Hughes basically turned the censors into his publicists, sparking debates in newspapers, churches, and PTA meetings everywhere. Was The Outlaw a great movie? Maybe, maybe not. But it was a great scandal, changing how Hollywood sold movies and what American audiences expected from their stars. Every time a film today gets hyped for being too sexy for TV, tip your hat to Jane Russell and Howard Hughes. They started that fight, and Hollywood never looked back. Song of the South, 1946. It's the Disney movie so controversial, it's practically a ghost, locked away in the vault, never to stream, rarely to screen, and never to be acknowledged by the Mouse House in public. But when Song of the South hit theaters in 1946, it wasn't just another family musical. It was a cultural lightning rod that sparked debates still raging today. Picture this: Walt Disney, fresh off a string of animated classics, decides to blend live action with cartoon for the first time ever. The result? Uncle Remus and his tales of Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and that zip-a-dee-doo-dah tune that's stuck in your head already. Visually, it was groundbreaking. But the controversy? It was about everything else. From the jump, civil rights groups and black newspapers slammed the film for its happy slave stereotypes and its nostalgic, sanitized vision of the Old South. The NAACP protested, warning that the film helps perpetuate a dangerously glorified picture of slavery. Even in the 1940s, this wasn't just a debate about taste. It was about the national conscience, the stories America chose to tell itself, and who got to tell them. Disney's PR machine tried to spin it, arguing the film was set after the Civil War, that it wasn't meant to offend, that James Baskett's performance as Uncle Remus was a triumph of warmth and wisdom. He'd win an honorary Oscar, the first for a black male actor, but the damage was done. Some cities banned it outright. Others held segregated screenings. And as civil rights momentum grew in the decades to come, Song of the South faded into infamy. Yet its legacy lingers, debated in film schools, referenced in protests, and lurking behind Disney attractions like Splash Mountain. The controversy forced Disney to confront its own history and shaped how future generations discussed race, memory, and pop culture. Song of the South wasn't just a movie, it was a battle line in America's long, unfinished reckoning with its past. Rope, 1948. You want taboo? Hitchcock's Rope tied audiences up in knots and left censors scrambling for scissors. On the surface, it's a taut, elegant thriller. Two young intellectuals murder a friend just for the thrill of it, then throw a dinner party with his corpse hidden in the room. But the real shock? The subtext and the style, both of which were decades ahead of their time. Let's start with the style. Rope was designed to look like a single unbroken shot, a technical feat in 1948 that had critics' heads spinning and filmmakers drooling with envy. Every camera move was choreographed down to the second. Walls slid away, lights moved on pulleys, and the cast performed like stage actors in a high-wire act. For viewers used to Hollywood's safe editing rhythms, Rope felt like a live grenade, tense, immediate, and impossible to look away from. But the plot, that's where the controversy exploded. Inspired by the real-life Leopold and Loeb murder case, Hitchcock's film is dripping with subversive subtext. The killers, Brandon and Philip, are coded as a gay couple, boldly hinted at through lingering glances, shared secrets, and lines that would make the Hayes office sweat. In 1948, homosexuality was not just taboo, it was forbidden by Hollywood's own production code. But Hitchcock, ever the master of suggestion, slipped it past the censors by dressing the film up as an intellectual exercise in crime and punishment. Audiences and critics were divided. Some called it perverse. Others thought it was dangerously amoral. The long, suspenseful takes, combined with the chilling calm of James Stewart as the guests grow suspicious, only turned up the heat. The controversy wasn't just about what happened on screen. It was about what wasn't said, the secrets that festered under polite society's surface. Rope didn't just test Hollywood's boundaries, it snapped them. It challenged viewers to question the line between morality and performance. And it opened the door for decades of psychological thrillers that dared to ask, what if evil is closer than we think? Hitchcock's experiment may have shocked its time, but it left a mark that still pulses through cinema's veins today. Black Narcissus, 1947. If you think nuns are always calm, collected, and free from desire, Black Narcissus is here to destroy your illusions, one feverish frame at a time. This is the movie that made convent life look like a powder keg about to blow. And in 1947, nobody saw it coming. Forget the usual holy rollers and habit cliches. This film unleashes repressed passion, jealousy, and madness with such intensity that you might wonder if someone spiked the holy water. Set high in the Himalayas, a group of Anglican nuns led by Deborah Kerr's sister Clodagh try to run a school and hospital in a remote palace that's dripping with faded sensuality. The wind howls, the colors pop, and the cliffs seem to taunt the women's spiritual resolve. But it's not the altitude that makes things dizzy. It's the forbidden longing swirling beneath those habits. Enter Mr. Dean, a rugged British agent whose very presence sends pulses racing and self-control crumbling. You can feel the tension rising with every scene, every sideways glance, every struggle to maintain composure as old traumas and hidden desires surface. The controversy hit from all sides. In Britain and the US, religious groups went after the film for its blasphemous suggestion that even nuns could fall victim to earthly temptation. The film's intense psychological breakdowns and hallucinatory Technicolor visuals made censors nervous, especially Sister Ruth, played by Kathleen Byron, whose descent into madness and crimson lipstick became an icon of cinematic hysteria. But let's not forget the colonial context. The film's exoticized setting and casting of white actors in brownface for key Indian roles raised eyebrows even in the 1940s. Yet it was the raw, open depiction of sexual repression and psychological unraveling that gave Black Narcissus its radioactive edge. It went on to win Oscars for cinematography and art direction, and today filmmakers still cite it as an influence when it comes to mixing beauty and madness. In its day, though, it was the film your priest or parents probably warned you about. Proof that when it comes to temptation and turmoil, nobody's immune, not even those who wear the veil. The Lost Weekend, 1945. Think Hollywood only got real about addiction in the modern era? Think again. The Lost Weekend hit audiences like a gut punch in 1945, daring to show alcoholism not as comic relief or moral failing, but as a full-blown bone-deep disease. No glitz, no glamour, just Ray Milland in a career-best performance spiraling through 4 days of desperation, deception, and self-destruction that were way too raw for comfort. Based on Charles R. Jackson's semi-autobiographical novel, the film follows failed writer Don Burnham on a bender so bleak that even by today's standards it feels alarmingly honest. He lies, he steals, he manipulates his loved ones, and he's utterly convincing as a man at war with himself and the bottle. There are no quick fixes, no neatly tied bows, just the relentless, humiliating grind of addiction and the agony of those who try and often fail to help. At the time, this wasn't just unusual, it was scandalous. Studios had always tiptoed around addiction, worried about censors and sponsors. The production code all but banned realistic portrayals of vice, and the liquor industry was fuming. Many in Hollywood predicted disaster, warning that audiences would reject a film so relentlessly grim, especially just as World War II was ending and the public supposedly craved escapism. Instead, The Lost Weekend became a sensation. Critics raved, audiences packed theaters, and the film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Billy Wilder, and Best Actor for Milland. But the controversy lingered. Was it too dark? Was it too much? Did it glamorize addiction or demonize the addict? The film sparked national conversations about alcoholism, inspired support groups, and even triggered industry boycotts. No matter which side you're on, The Lost Weekend proved that movies could tackle the ugly, uncomfortable truths and force us all to confront what we'd rather ignore. Its influence echoes through every hard-hitting addiction drama since. Sometimes, the most controversial movies are the ones that hold up a mirror and don't flinch from what they see. Gentleman's Agreement, 1947. What happens when Hollywood dares to call out American prejudice, right in America's own backyard? You get Gentleman's Agreement, a film that was as much an act of courage as it was an act of storytelling. Released in 1947, it didn't take on some distant villain. It went straight for the heart of the country's most uncomfortable topic, anti-Semitism in post-war America. Gregory Peck stars as Phil Green, a journalist who goes undercover as a Jewish man to experience and expose the everyday bigotry that polite society refuses to see. What follows isn't a parade of cartoon villains, but an unnervingly accurate portrait of how discrimination festers in subtle slights, social snubs, and unspoken agreements. It's the kind of film that makes audiences squirm because the villains aren't just the hood-wearing extremists, but your neighbors, your friends, maybe even yourself. The controversy hit before the film even finished shooting. Studio heads and advertisers worried about backlash from conservative audiences and southern markets. Some theater chains flat out refused to show the movie. Critics and political groups accused it of stirring up trouble, or, ironically, being anti-American for exposing uncomfortable truths. Even Jewish organizations were split. Some praised the film for its honesty. Others feared it would only provoke more prejudice. But Gentleman's Agreement pressed on, igniting national debate about the difference between tolerance and acceptance, silence and complicity. It swept the Oscars, taking home Best Picture, Best Director for Elia Kazan, and Best Supporting Actress for Celeste Holm. The film's legacy isn't just in awards, but in its willingness to force a conversation America wasn't ready to have. It's a story as relevant now as it was then. Proof that when Hollywood takes on real-life injustice, the fallout can be as seismic as the issues it dares to expose. Watching it today, you'll still feel the sting, and maybe wonder if we've really come as far as we'd like to believe. Duel in the Sun, 1946. If Hollywood's golden age ever flirted with pure scandal, Duel in the Sun was its sultry wink. Nicknamed Lust in the Dust by critics and censors alike, this 1946 Technicolor epic turned the Western into a fever dream of desire, violence, and moral outrage. Forget the polite love triangles and clean-cut cowboys. This was a frontier where temptation galloped straight at the audience, and nobody left the theater with their innocence intact. Jennifer Jones stars as Pearl Chavez, a half-breed, the script's words, not ours, caught in a no-man's land of prejudice and sexual obsession. The story: two rival brothers played with animal magnetism by Gregory Peck and Joseph Cotton battle for Pearl's affection and their own twisted version of honor. The result? Sweaty stares, steamy encounters, and enough sexual innuendo to make even modern viewers raise an eyebrow. The Catholic Legion of Decency outright condemned it, labeling it morally offensive. Some communities banned it. Others demanded cuts. Newspapers decried its rampant lust and called for boycotts. But what really made Duel in the Sun scandalous wasn't just its steamy subject matter. It was how it put racial and gender taboos front and center, then smashed them with the subtlety of a runaway locomotive. Pearl's struggle is not just about choosing between two men, but about surviving a society that wants to control and destroy her. The violence is raw. The romance is reckless. The ending is nothing short of operatic tragedy. Director King Vidor went all in, using color, sound, and spectacle to stir the audience's emotions. And producer David O. Selznick, always the showman, turned every bit of controversy into box office gold. It worked. Duel in the Sun became a sensation, one of the top earners of the decade. The scandal didn't hurt. It sold tickets. Was it trashy? Maybe. Was it daring? Absolutely. Duel in the Sun is proof that controversy, when harnessed by the right hands, can make movie history. And sometimes you have to ride straight into the storm to make people sit up and notice. The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, 1944. You want to know how far screwball comedy could push the envelope in the 1940s? Look no further than The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, the movie that left censors sputtering, politicians fuming, and audiences doubled over with laughter. On the surface, it's a wacky Preston Sturges farce about small-town America during World War II. Underneath, it's a ticking time bomb of taboo subjects, pregnancy, single motherhood, and patriotic chaos that somehow slipped past the watchdogs of decency. The plot is as wild as it gets for 1944. Trudy Cockenlocker. Betty Hutton, a wholesome local girl, attends a farewell dance for soldiers and, after a wild night, wakes up with a wedding ring and no memory of her husband's name. Oh, and she's pregnant. Try pitching that one to the Hayes office, the guardians of Hollywood morality, who had strict rules about everything from marital fidelity to even implying sex on screen. Sturges, a genius at subversion, used slapstick, misunderstandings, and rapid-fire dialogue to smuggle his scandalous story under the radar. The censors demanded rewrites, threatened bans, and issued warnings. Sturges played along on the surface, but the film's winks and nods were anything but subtle to those paying attention. It's a biting satire of small-town hypocrisy and patriotic hysteria. The local police chief? Her own father. The miracle? Just wait until you see how the film wraps up the paternity chaos in the most un-Hays Code twist possible. Audiences loved it. Critics hailed it. The government grumbled, but box office receipts drowned out the noise. In the end, The Miracle of Morgan's Creek wasn't just a comedy. It was a clever act of rebellion that proved you could make America laugh even as you poked fun at its sacred cows. So, next time you think they don't make them like they used to, remember this. Sometimes old Hollywood broke the rules harder than anyone today dares. So, were the 1940s really a tame era? Or were they secretly Hollywood's wildest decade? From Forbidden Love to Social Rebellion, these movies didn't just entertain, they challenged, provoked, and set the screen on fire. Which of these controversial classics shocked you most? Or did we leave out your favorite scandal? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more cinematic deep dives, and don't forget to share with your fellow movie buffs. Because sometimes, the most outrageous stories are hiding in plain sight.